Ewell, welcome back to the show.
Man,
How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am really honored to be back for a second show. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I'm
Yeah,
looking
it's good.
forward to it. Last
Yeah.
time we spoke a lot about Hurricane Katrina and the weather that you're getting down in New Orleans, and now this time it's snowed,
Yes.
which is also strange for you guys.
Yes.
It was a good change of pace. Did people are people prepared for to drive
Absolutely
in the
not.
snow?
We- My home, uh, we had, I still have snow on the ground right now. We had my yard. The official snowfall was 10 inches. That obliterated the record of 2.7 inches, which is like 100 years ago. But my yard, because of snow drifts and the way the snow is falling, and a lot of people in around my area really got hammered. I had a foot of snow in my front yard. I had 2 to 3 feet of snow in my backyard because of the drifts. It's wild. I mean, we're doing snow angels in a city that does not get snow. It was a blizzard for us, a word we never ever thought we'd use. But I'll tell you what, the city of New Orleans is something special. I mean, we went through some other tough stuff a month ago,
Yeah, yeah.
all over the national news for all the wrong reasons for January 1st. This was almost a healing event for us, to let go. And that's one thing we do in this city is we know how to come back. And we turn things in a sense of humor. If you want to have some fun, just Google snowman New Orleans and just see what comes up. All
I
sorts of
might
places.
I might have to
A
do
lot of
that.
Mardi Gras snowmen.
There you go. That'll be fun. Yeah,
So we have
I
a joie de vivre. We have a joie de vivre. A joy. Trying to live our lives as joyful as possible, and we live up to that. We do our best to live up to that.
Yeah, I meant to. I was meaning to ask you about the January 1st incident, if that kind of rippled throughout the city.
Oh,
Because like
no.
some things are more they like hit home more than
Yeah.
others. Was that one that kind of hit very close to home
Oh,
for you
absolutely.
guys?
It it really hit home because over time we started to know people who knew people, right?
Hmm.
But just sit there and watch to wake up that morning and turn the TV on, and that's the first thing you see is jarring. It was really sad. I think there was a sadness that poured over the city for several days, and that's for the people who were not directly impacted. The people who were directly impacted, their lives are devastated. So yeah, that was brutal to see this see ourselves in the news for that reason, and it really brought home. New Orleans is a small community. I mean, they say 7 degrees of separation. New Orleans is more like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So eventually, I'm like, okay, I'm going to know somebody knows somebody, and that did ultimately happen. But what it really put in perspective for me is when I hear of those types of incidents happen, shootings, whatever, in a small community of a school where everybody knows everybody. I know how we felt. I cannot imagine how these small communities feel the devastation that they feel. So yes, so the snowfall to come was very welcome. It took our minds off of a lot of heavy stuff, and we're preparing right now. We're preparing for Super Bowl, and we also preparing for Mardi Gras. So we move forward. But those families that have been impacted, I pray for them. I feel for them. It's horrific, and it was horrific for our city. It really
Yeah.
was.
Are people a little bit on
Devastating.
edge?
The ripple effect is just it's massive, and that was a global story. You know.
Yeah. Are people a little bit on edge for the Super Bowl and Mardi Gras in terms
No,
of like,
I
could this
think the
happen
city.
again?
No, we had the Sugar Bowl. That saying, but they had to push the Sugar Bowl back one day.
Mm.
And I would say I would feel safer in that building than probably any building in the city. Same thing goes for Super Bowl because NFL they cannot afford to have any shenanigans whatsoever. So they've got this city buttoned up tight, and hopefully, all goes well. It should because we know how to manage a crowd. We know how to manage very large crowds. I mean, our city's 1 million people come to New Orleans for Mardi Gras.
Hmm.
So we know how to manage large scale crowds. An incident like what happened is obviously hopefully a one and never again situation. But if somebody wants to be malicious in that way, they're gonna find a way to do it no matter what.
Mm.
If it wasn't a truck, it would have been something else, you know. And in fact, he did try to do something else. It just didn't work. So fortunately, thank God. But our city, we love hosting events. We're a hospitality city. That's where we shine. We know how to do that at an exceptional level. And our city is back, and will continue to go forward. Yep.
Good. Well, like the one time I was there, I felt the hospitality for sure, and then knowing yourself and
Yeah.
a few other people down there, it's like it's very welcoming, and I was just able to go explore a little
Yeah.
bit, and it was just try new things, go to the World War
Hmm.
II museum, go to some steakhouses, some walk down the street. And
Hmm.
of course, there's like all the things about New Orleans where it's like there's crazy people all over the place, but
Oh yeah.
it's a fun kind of feeling to it. Um, at least that was my kind of take on things for like the week I was there or whatever. Um,
It,
but okay, so let's jump into it. And before I forget, the question from the last guest, I think this will kind of bode well into the rest of our conversation. Um, if you guys actually, we didn't even do the elevator pitch for you. Let's do a quick elevator pitch, who you are and what you do, and then we'll jump into the rest of it
okay.
as we were talking about before.
So long story short, I spent my career in the trade association world. I became a consultant almost 2 years. Oh, I became a consultant 2.5 years ago. And I've been with the franchising world for a while now. And I'm a franchise consultant, matchmaking people veterans, people who have been laid off or their job might be in jeopardy, or people who just want to pursue entrepreneurship. And I'm an advocate for entrepreneurship through franchising because you get a playbook starting out. I also do the development side of the business. So on the first side of it, I match people to the right franchise for them. And I have a book about that called Your First Franchise Roadmap, which I wrote that because I got asked so many questions when I tell people I'm a franchise consultant. People are like, well, what is that? And they started peppering me. I'd have 30 minutes of questions. So I put it in the form of a book. The other piece I do as well is I do the development side of the business, meaning I've got a couple of brands I'm working with. I'll talk about one of them today. We're going to start promoting the other one in February. But one of the brands is a steakhouse, which we'll talk about a little later. And so I work specifically with that brand, and we help them do their marketing and grow their business
Very
and,
nice.
and scale their business through
Mm.
franchise.
This will go out in February, so if you want to talk about
Perfect.
that as well, then we can do that one too.
Okay. Yeah.
Question from the last guest though, which I actually find interesting, because if I had asked you 2.5 years ago, I think I would have had the answer. But it says if you had to quit your current career, what would you do instead?
Oh, if I could do anything, I've been asked this before, and I know my go-to answer.
Mm.
My wife is a classically trained singer. She's got perfect pitch. She can play piano and she can sight read. I can do none of those things. I do play guitar, acoustic guitar, but my vocal range is as thin as a sheet of paper, and I have a bad ear. So if I could be a rock star that had perfect, had a good a vocal range and had a little more rhythm, that's what I'd be doing.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer for sure. And what's funny about that is the one that asked me that question, he's an opera singer. He's a bass opera singer. So
Yeah,
you went right into his world with the music answer. So
there you go.
that's funny. Okay, so let's start with the book piece. Because last time you were on, for those listening, go check that episode out. It was a lot of the backstory and how you ended up here.
Mhm.
And the book wasn't out yet. And so obviously you and I had talked or had been talking this past year, and so I
Mhm.
knew some of your process with the book, etc. But detail kind of for the people listening. One, you mentioned how you got the idea for the book, but like, okay, you've got an idea and now making it reality.
Mhm.
How does that work? What are the steps? Do you have to find a publisher right away? Are you thinking, no, I'm just going to do self-publishing on Amazon and then actually starting to write? Because there's lots of things where like you have an idea and then you actually have to start. And it's like, where do you start?
So the okay, so 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I wrote. another book, my first book. So I learned a ton. Self-published both of them, by the way. I learned a ton on how to do that. Um, and I didn't know if I didn't even enjoy it, but I always wanted to write one. So I wrote the first one like 2.5 years ago. And I think they often say the first book you write is for yourself as far as the learning piece. You ultimately are writing a book to serve others. But in this case, you learn and you make your mistakes. So I learned from that first book, and I became addicted to writing. I had no idea that was even in me. That's something that really kind of be quite candid to surprise me. And I can literally sit down. This is the book, Your First Franchise, we're talking about today. And I ended up writing 150 pages, which is a lot for me because I would never have considered myself a writer. But when I started writing, especially the second time, I'm like, I can't. I try to time block things that I do, and it was so easy for me to just blow past the time blocks and lose all my discipline. I fell in love with it. I enjoy writing, and especially to know that it actually helps and serves people, providing them a pathway to do something. And that's ultimately, I mean, if it's not a fiction book, hopefully the book is there to help somebody. And that's what us as entrepreneurs do. We help. We're there to solve problems for others.
Hmm. So if
So,
you're
so
if
the technical pieces, the beautiful thing is now you've got the design was fiber. I found somebody. The formatting was a lady through, I think, fiber as well. Actually, the design was 99 Designs.
hmm,
I use them. And the Fiverr lady is the one who helped me do the formatting and the layout of the book itself. Because that I didn't want to mess with, because I didn't want to screw that up. And then, of course, you go through Amazon, and that's a process learning how to do all of that. So,
if you were gonna give advice to somebody on like they've got an idea for a book, but they haven't put a word down on the page yet. It's like, do you start with an outline? Do you just start going? I know everybody's process is a little bit different, and that's why I try to ask everybody who's written a book. I ask everybody this question because everybody has a different answer, and they're all interesting. But like, where
oh
do you even
gosh,
start?
I literally just started writing. I kind of, the name of the book is Roadmap. I had an idea based on where I want to take people on the journey through, which is what I do when I consult with people. So I kind of knew the landscape that I was going to take people down. Um, but the number one thing to do is every book starts with a word, one word. And if you don't get the first word down on paper, then the second one never happens. So, and that holds true for just about anything. I mean, whether you're going to go into business, whether you're going to go to school, whatever it is you're going to do, you got to take that first step. And know this: it is a discovery process. It is if it's your first book, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. Um, you're going to figure out whether you like it or not real quick. And fortunately, I fell in love with it. I love writing now. I love writing social posts. I just love writing. It's fun to see writing impact people.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you seen the meme? It's like a picture from SpongeBob where it's the word the and like the biggest, fanciest font, and then the rest of the page is blank. And people will say like, "Oh, I've started my essay now," or "I've started my book now," and it's just one big the at the top of the page in like super fancy font.
I have not, but I got an antidote for that. But it
Yeah, yeah,
makes
go.
there was a famous sportscaster named Hap Glaude here in New Orleans, and he was telling a story one day when he was in high school. He's somebody else who, if you heard him speak, you're like, how did he ever become a sportscaster? Because his grammar was hideous. But he got an A on his term paper for English, his English class, his senior year. And all the kids worked their tails off to write their term paper, their English paper, however many pages that was, probably 20 pages back then. And his was one page. And he knew he was going to go into the sports world. He wrote, wait, he wrote 3 words. He wrote rain, period, game canceled, period. And he turned that in. And as you as a
Oh,
soccer player, you can relate to that because it tells the entire story.
yeah,
There's no score, there's no penalties, there's no plays. He told an entire story with 3 words.
amazing. That's so funny.
He got a net.
Yeah, stories like that crack me up because it's so outside of the box that like to even think about that and then actually do it. Like there's times where I've been like, "Oh, this would be funny if I did this." And then I'm like, "Well, obviously I'll never do it because I
Mhm.
want to get a good grade." And then to actually go do it is very funny.
Yep.
Um, okay, so then and so you get the book published, you write through the book. Was the editing process in terms of like you weren't working with an editor necessarily?
The first book I did
Uh-huh.
because
How is that?
I did not know how to edit a book, and I'm my worst writer. I mean, I have a little bit of dyslexia, so I have a tendency. My wife uh, is very glad for chat. I'll tell you how I use chat for stuff. But I have a tendency to write sentences in reverse, and I don't see that. And I can't, for whatever reason, I can't even correct it. It's something that my brain works that way. So the first book, I actually have a good friend of mine, Jeremy Plaisance, who helped me edit the book. He did a great job. With chat, I wrote the entire book, but I went chapter by paragraph, dropping it to chat, asking it to keep my tone and to keep my tone and to make sure the grammar was correct.
Chat GPT,
And
you mean?
then I just started putting it together like a puzzle. So that's how
Chat
I did. That's
Chat
how I
GPT, you mean?
Yeah, that's how I used it.
Mm.
But I did not use it. I will say this, I did not use it to write the book because
No, no,
I
no.
did not want to lose. I think I mean, when you see a chat created AI image,
Hmm.
they were a novelty at first. They were kind of cute and fun. Now it's getting a little stale. Well, the same thing with chat writing. It's incredibly generic. There's certain words it just uses over and over and over and over. So I wanted to get away from that. So I wrote it in my tone. Sometimes it would rewrite a sentence, but it would do a little bit better. But it was still the foundation of it was my words, every bit of it.
Yeah,
So
I need to use it a little bit more. I think it's so useful that um I need to like figure out how to use it and stuff and be friends with it so when the
that saved me a
robots
lot
take
of
over
money.
the world. Yeah.
That saved me a lot of money because editing a book is not cheap.
Mm.
It's not a cheap proposition for somebody to read it through a book and page by page and edit. Someone who writes as wonky as I do.
Okay, so you get the book edited, it's published, then marketing. How are you marketing the book? Because there's like, are you going to local bookstores? Or are you doing different things? What
I use
like,
it 2 ways. I'm actually getting ready to do a press release pretty soon for the book. But I haven't, believe it or not, as a marketer, I probably should do better than this. In the third book, I'm working on a third book right now. It's going to be about sales. So I have to get this book out there more. Um, but I've given away a ton. I use it 2 ways. I give it away on any LinkedIn post I talk about franchising. I offer it for free, and the person can go to the website and download it for free. That generates a lot of interest. And I'm giving a real book. It's not just a little PDF. So there's that piece. So I'm not half the time I'm not selling the physical book. I'm not interested. And I do a lot of networking. It's the best business card ever. It's a and and the price through Amazon, it makes it doable to hand out to people at a meeting who come to you who are interested. I'll hand them a copy of the book. And it established that this is the beauty of a book more than anything else. I'm talking about the book on your platform. It establishes credibility for people who are considering a book. So it's a great tool, and you have to know what the heck you're talking about to put something worthwhile together.
mhm,
So it's based off of experience, and
that makes
everybody has a
sense.
book in them.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a story. The first book I wrote was called "It's Bloggable. Your Voice Matters," because everybody's voice truly matters, and it's important to use your voice. And if you've got a story to share that can help others, or a how-to on how to help others, that's an incredible gift. If you're a fiction writer, you're taking people on a different type of gift. You're just taking them on a journey, an escape type journey, and that's a gift in itself as well. So anybody who's ever thought about it, I put down that first word.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, okay, so you talk about networking. For you as a franchise consultant, you're touching kind of every end of the spectrum in terms of helping brands franchise, but also helping people pick which one would work
Correct.
best for them. So, if someone was to follow you on LinkedIn, they would see loads of posts of you in cities all over the country all the time doing
Hmm.
networking events and talking to this person and talking to that person. And here's my like little lanyard ID card from this conference that was over here, and I met this person. What like where I'm not exactly sure what I'm asking because sometimes when you go to these sort of networking events, they're very specific. Like for example, there's like psychology conferences or there's science
Hmm.
conferences or things like this. When people here who aren't in the business world here, like, "Oh, I'm just going to a networking event,"
What is it?
it's like very nebulous.
Hmm.
So like what are you ch like which end are you chasing when you're going after those? Like how
Most,
like I guess
yeah.
how do you attack each end of the franchising from the brand perspective? Like how do you attack that? And then the individual perspective, how do you attack that?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And so, for the brand perspective, the value that a franchise consultant like myself, and there's others around the country, there's not that many of us actually, a few thousand of us in the United States, not unlike realtors is a million plus. So there's just a handful of us. So the way we learn the business, the way we build relationships is we go to franchising events. Like I'm a member of IFPG, International Franchise Professionals Group. And we have over 600 franchises that I work with that are part of that system that I have access to promote and market those brands to get people interested perhaps in one of those brands. So to really get to know those people, to franchisors, I want to build relationships with them. I want to know that what I'm introducing somebody to is a brand that I trust and will do good by my candidate. Okay. So the best way to do that is to go to the conferences, and we have regionals all over the United States. Um, and when you go to the regionals, you get to meet the franchisors themselves, and that begins the relationship. Next thing you know, you're getting invited to some of the franchisors have invited me and other consultants out to their corporate locations and go visit with the brands themselves in person. So the networking starts at the regional event. We have weekly Zoom calls with them all as well. So that's also another form of networking through the Zoom. But it's the in-person part that really matters. You can do a lot online. You can research a lot online, but you can get pulled in a lot of different directions online and down a rabbit hole. You want to know that you're going to be talking to someone who actually has the relationships. That is the value of the franchise consultant. Because at the end of the day, somebody's not buying a car online. And there was a time when people didn't think you'd buy a car online. Um, it's not a quick decision. It is
Hmm.
a journey people go through, and fear always kicks up along that journey. So you have to continue the education process with the candidate, put their nerves at ease, because that's going to kick in somewhere in the process. It's going to kick in. I can promise you that. So that's important. So the network, going back to the networking though, it starts with the networking meetings and then going to their corporate locations, which I've been all over the United States, visiting and meeting with their the founders and their teams. The other side of it is how do I meet people to franchise to introduce them to franchising? Well, that of course happens through social. That happens through media. It happens through a lot of different avenues. The book brings another channel of people coming to me. But the real value is the best leads a consultant's going to get is either a personal referral, and the next best thing is from a networking meeting where you actually meet somebody face to face. They get to know you, they get to trust you, and then you can literally sit down with that person. I do this virtually with people all over the United States, and then I intentionally go to networking meetings in my local market. And in fact, I had a deal close at the beginning of this year, and that deal was because of this book with me speaking for 1 minute at a BNI meeting.
Mm,
It has established I was able to speak to what I do. And when you go to a BNI meeting, that's a Business Networking Institute. That's their it's one of it's the biggest networking group in the world. Well, they have chapters all over the United States, so you can go to that type of a meeting and make your 1 minute pitch, and then somebody else makes their 1 minute pitch, and the room meets and gathers and talks to each other afterwards. So that's another way for me to meet people, and that's really powerful. I really appreciate that process. And I appreciate it so much. We started another group where it was 8 of us around a table. A couple friends of mine actually started it, and I was invited to be part of the original 8. And I'm grateful because now that 8 we meet, and that this group is free. So we started this for free at a coffee shop with 8 of us. Now we have 75 people. Not all 75 show up, but about 30 people show up once a month for free for an hour. And people show up a half hour early and stay a half hour late because everybody's kind of gotten to know each other. And that has been an incredibly powerful networking tool. And that's a great way to get in the community. And if you can be a part of it or start one in your local community, that positions you in a great spot to help build business for your business. And at the end of the day, you're serving others. I keep coming back to that. That's really important to know that you have a solution to a problem that somebody has.
talk to the brand side because I think most people, well, maybe that's not true. Some people at least have the perception that like franchise is something like McDonald's
Yeah.
or a Dunkin' Donuts or one of
Mhm.
these like very big organizations like international organizations, etc. But from our conversations and as you I'm sure we'll go into to detail, there are
Yeah.
some where it's like local steakhouses and other kinds of things. So for people kind of getting into like with the intended audience of people that maybe would be looking at doing something like this, um, but they're like, oh, I don't want to be involved with some
Mhm.
giant conglomerate of whatever.
Mhm.
Talk to like the brand piece of like, it's not, well, like, not even to lead you to say, oh, there's smaller companies as well, but talk to the variety of brands that you work with and like how you would go about figuring out the markets for like, okay, you like this person would be good for this one and the varieties that you have.
Sure. So, for starters, you hit the nail on the head. And we didn't coach each other on this. A lot of people, when the two things I hear probably the most, and Dunkin' Donuts would be, or Dunkin' would be the third, but it's always McDonald's and Chick-fil-A.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
People think that's what franchising is. And it's easy to have that perception because there's one on every corner. That's the first perception. They think it's franchising is primarily food. That is the furthest thing from the truth. And the other perception that they have is, oh my gosh, they look at that building on the corner and they know it's a prime piece of real estate. They know that building's expensive, and they know it's probably $1 million or plus up. And it's going to be in that million to $2 to $3 million range to put one, depending upon that location. There are many of the franchises I work with that are in our system start around 75 to 285 in that range. So that's still, look, that's a lot of money. It's an investment, but it's not a million, or 2 million, or 3 million. And when you're working with people who've been working for a while, they've got a nest egg saved up. They don't need to come up with, let's just use $100,000 or 150. They don't need to come up with 100,000 or 150. They can get an express loan with SBA within about 15 days, 14 to 15 days, whatever, I forget the number, days it is to get that express loan. And they're going to put down maybe 10%, 15%, 20%, depending upon their credit rating. Or they can even use a 401k rollover if they have a 401k. They can take the money that's in the 401k and simply shift it and not be penalized because they're using it to build an asset that has value that will employ people. So the government does not penalize you if you want to use your 401k. And you could use just 10,000 from your 401k, or you could use the whole amount and have no debt going into a business. Whatever your risk tolerance is. That's a personal choice for that person. But they realize, oh my gosh, I have options. It's not a million or 2 million. And if they don't like food, they're not they actually have a lot of options. And some of the bigger options are, and I'll talk about food, and because I love food. I'm one of the consultants that actually likes talking about food because of my background promoting food for so many seafood, Louisiana seafood for so many years. But I mean, you look at the home services sector, and I'll talk about a couple of the brands. Uh, the home services sector is a great, it's a great industry. It's a durable industry. You look at what happened with COVID. Restaurants were shutting down. A lot of brick and mortar businesses were shutting down, but the home services sector took off like a rocket. And you just look around your house that you're in, your apartment that you're in, the roof, the gutters, the shutters, the walls need painting, the outside needs painting, the lawn needs cutting, taking care of, driveways, garages, you name it, bathrooms, kitchens, on and on and on. The home services sector is a great sector, and a lot of those you can get in for 100, below 100, and a lot of them hover around that 150 range. So there's a lot of opportunities there. But you got the pet industry, you got the medical industry, the beauty industry, the health industry. Um, oh gosh, and the business industry, business to business side. So there's all these different sectors that people can get into at a lower cost that they didn't realize. And the ones that don't require brick and mortar, a lot of those are going to be 150 and below. When you start getting to a business that's a beauty business or a restaurant, you're going to start creeping up in the price because you need a retail space.
Mm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Talk to some of the idea makes perfect sense to me, right? Like you pay in to use the branding and the playbook, like you mentioned before, but you still need, depending on what it is, you still need the right people around you. Like I can make a Chick-fil-A,
Hmm.
but if I don't have like people that show up to work on time or managers or whatever that like are with like they're too lax on certain things or whatever the case may be is like you still need to get people that you trust. I feel for me personally at least
No,
that is
that's
always a hang up that I'm like, yeah, this makes sense, but also like then for me to invest and then to run it versus something where it's like a smaller thing where I just or whoever invests is like a one man show. Like you mentioned there's like food trucks and stuff where it's like just you.
mhm.
Um How do you get through that sort of coaching the process of like, okay, you're going to run a retail store. Well, you need people to do the cashiers or whatever, but you still need to hire good people. Like, how do you coach them through that? Because there's the like deal itself and opening, and then there's the actual running of the of whatever the business is.
Okay. So do you know? Okay, so this is why franchising thrives. There's 4,000 franchises in the United States. About half of those are the big hotels and so forth. The rest, every franchise you look at, you're going to get a playbook. All the trials and errors and mistakes have been made by the franchisor. They're not to say they can't make any more, but the bulk of them have been, by the time they're ready to franchise, have been worked through in and they have a system and a process. The reason why veterans do so well in franchising is because they're so used to rigid systems and processes that they learn through the military. They simply apply it, they walk right in, they know, they get it, they understand. I'll follow the system and process, and I will have the outcome generally that I want. So that's the number one thing is you get systems and processes. You get that playbook. I like to say you're not starting on the 20-yard line of a kickoff on your side of the field. You're starting off in the red zone about ready to enter into the end zone, getting the business going. Now, sustaining the business. You're no, if you're by yourself, you're making all the mistakes by yourself, and time is against you because time burns money. When you go into a franchise, they're going to ask you to make sure you have enough liquidity to cash flow the business. They're going to coach you through this whole process because they want you to be successful. Okay, they don't want you to fail because that's a bad reflection on their brand. So it's in their best interest to do the best job possible. A good franchisor is to coach you through that process. So you're not only getting the playbook, you're generally entering a community. And the community is twofold. One, it's the franchisor themselves, and they're going to be your mentor through the process, coaching you how to get the business going, how to hire other people, how to market the business, how to maybe some of them even help you with the books. It just depends upon the level of franchise. The other piece of the community is you have maybe 20 or 30 or 40, depending on the size of the franchise, of other franchises ease like yourself. And you get to know them as well. And those people oftentimes have weekly calls or monthly calls with each other so they can learn from each other's mistakes and learn from each other's successes. So, but the business, like any other business, has risk, you know. So it minimizes the risk when you have a playbook, tested systems and processes, and a community to fall back and lean on. So all that makes that is a huge. That's why people go into franchising.
Hmm.
Now,
You want to?
some people are not meant to do that because they cannot follow a system and process. They should not be in franchising.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a few like creative outside the box
Yeah.
You want to touch on the ones that you're starting to promote?
Yeah, I'll
Um,
share. I'll share about 4 or 5 with you if that's
sure.
good for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And since you are the soccer man, uh, uh, known as Jenkins, there's an inside joke there between two of us, and a lot of other playmates, or your teammates, I should say. Uh, Speaking of playmates, there's a kids soccer program that franchise that I work with, and it's a low cost of entry. You can start it out of your house. The startup cost is around 75-ish to get going, and can go up to about 100, just around 105. But their federal disclosure document shows revenues of their 14 corporate locations of $1.4 million. So that's solid. There's a franchise I'm working with personally called Doe's Eat Place. That's the one I'm doing the development for. It's a steakhouse so if somebody's in the food, I'm talking about food. What makes them unique is a few things. And they've been around since 1941. They have a James Beard Award. And if you're a foodie or you know anybody as a foodie or chef, they know what a James Beard Award is. That is like a Grammy or an Oscar for a chef or restaurant to get that award. Well, this little franchise, they got one in 2007 and they weren't even looking for it. They were nominated for it. And when they got it, they're like, what is that? They're so genuine and so endearing. It's with the charm of Doe. It's called Doe's Eat Place. The charm of their business is why they have grown. They've got 9 locations in addition to the corporate one. Between the 9 locations, they have of 147,000 Facebook followers. So they've got a very loyal following. So
Mm,
why does it work? Because if you think, oh my gosh, they got a James Beard Award, I'm going to need a chef. You don't. You just need a cook because their menu is so simple. It's six menu. The core menu item is 6 menu items. So it's a simple restaurant concept and it's low cost. They're not trying to be Ruth's Chris with the expensive ambiance. It's that you can get in just over 400 and just below 650 to get in one with the right location. It would kill in Washington D.C. By the way, not too far from you. It would
mm,
absolutely crush in Washington D.C. because Bill Clinton is one of their favorite customers. Morgan Freeman is one of their favorite customers. The Mannings here in New Orleans, that's one of their favorite. They're one of their favorite customers. A unique brand in and of itself. It's very unique. Um, let's go to the house side, the
yeah.
home services side. I'm going to show you two more home services. I'm going to share one that kind of ties back to sports a little bit. The home services side, bath renovation is a big deal. So I've got a bath renovation franchise, and the investment's about 114 to 248. So that's still within that we're in the strike zone. The average unit volume for their brands is about $1.4 million, and their mature brands are doing around $2 million. So think about that. You're getting into a business with about, let's just call it 150 or 125. And you're creating a business within a matter of years, you can be doing million to $1 million to $2 million in business. That's a good return. And there's another brand I'm working with. It's a shutter brand. The shutters on your house. And I just interviewed the founder. I've gotten to know him pretty well, and his brand is unique. There's nothing else like it. There are a lot of people who sell shutters, but he is the largest shutter distributor in the world, and he's based out of Alabama. And he started franchising, and he's focusing on coastal communities. I mean, your area would be great, all the way up to New England and all across the Gulf Coast. He's got some people interested in the inside of the country as well. But his first franchisee did in the first year did over 400, and he's just starting. And the margins on that business are through the roof.
Hmm.
And that only takes one person to start. And if you want to bring on a helper, you can bring on a helper right away. So the thing about a lot of these businesses is, like the Does, you're gonna need to hire a team, right? You're gonna have to have a cook. You're gonna have to have waiters. The other ones I mentioned, it's usually one part. It's usually two people. In the case of the shutter business, it's one. Now I'm going to share one more with you. That's out of the box, completely out of the box, and I'm sharing it. And I got my hat on, this particular hat on, for a reason, and it ties back to sports and a lot of other things. And it's because of this little guy. See that?
Oh yeah, you showed us that on the
Yes.
yeah.
See me? See, it looks just like me. And I should have worn my LSU shirt as well. But this is a brand where you can literally make a mini me out of a person. And LSU has an NIL deal with this franchise. I think Tulane's in the works of getting an NIL deal with this franchise, and they're working with the NFL as well. And so, how is this even a franchise? So, there are two ways that this little mini me version of me is a franchise. From a corporate perspective, let's look at sports. NIL deals are big deals. So the players can have their own little statue, and they can be sold, and they can get they get their cut, and the franchisee gets their cut of every little statue that is sold through that NIL deal. Um, Corporations, let's say it's Chase Bank, and they have a corporate event. Well, they could put their logo right instead of the year here. It says 2024. They could put their logo, Chase, or their or emblem, whatever you want to call it. They can put that on here, and they have an event. They can have everybody at the event get a mini me version of themselves. So that is from the corporate side. From the personal side, imagine a mom and dad, and they want to document their kids' growth. They can get the stat. They can capture their kid when they're 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, and go up and down weddings, special events, parties, and it's a booth that they take on the road, and you step in that booth to take the photo, and it happens in an instant. There's like 95 cameras or so forth in the booth, and they capture every little detail. And I was shocked how detailed it was. You can even see here, I didn't have my pocket open. I had my pocket was open, and those are my Asics shoes. It captures
Oh
all
wow.
the details. That is a franchise, and the investment level to get started in that one's like 187, and they've got about 40 franchises around the United States right now. And it's an emerging brand. So my point of sharing that last one with you is there's a lot of things out there people have no idea. A lot of people come to you with an idea, this is what I want. And then what happens is in the process of me getting to know them and know where their strengths and their weaknesses are and where their interests lie and then where their finances are, as I get that information together, I'm able to come back and present that person the brands that are available that meet those criteria in their local market. And they're shocked. to see, oh my gosh, going back to your point earlier about McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, and then you show them this, like, what, what happened? So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, and that discovery part of the process is a lot of fun with the candidate.
Are you allowed to say what the names are? You only said the steakhouse one.
Yeah, the steakhouse this one is called Shrunk.
Uh-huh. Go
The
in the
kids
like the
soccer
order of
program's
the
called
ones that you
Soccer
did.
Stars.
Okay.
Yep, Soccer Stars. Joe's Eat Place is the one I work with. And then the bath renovation. Oh God. Oh jeez. I gotta look it up. Hold on. The bath renovation. I'm drawing a blank. 5-star bath renovations. It's like I've shown them dozens of times. And then the other one is Shutter House. All of those are in our system, and I work directly, and I know the founders of three of those, or four of those, four of the five. I personally know the founders because I've been to either to their locations or I've gotten to know them but yeah, I've interviewed a couple of the founders. I've interviewed, let's see, I've interviewed three of those founders as well from my podcast. And we got the
Yeah,
third.
go on that. So we've not touched on the podcast at all.
Yeah,
So first, like generally, well, I guess how's it going in your opinion?
with the podcast.
Yeah.
I love the podcast. The podcast, and you know this, and anybody listening to this, the most valuable part of the podcast is you and I've gotten to know each other because of podcasting and a mutual friend of ours named Josh. So, uh, and that's the beauty of podcasting. It's incredible. Sorry about networking. It's an incredible networking tool. So you get to meet a lot of people through the podcast. I have two versions of the podcast. I have Close the Deal, which is people can check out closethedeal.com. I have the interviews of some of the franchisors. I also interview entrepreneurs for that particular show. And I have a version called Your First Franchise Roadmap. And I'm going to ask you your opinion on something.
Hmm.
I am thinking of changing the podcast name to Franchise Profits, brought to you by Your First Franchise. You know, because I think that opens it up because some people are looking at most of the people I talk to are considering their first franchise. But Franchise Profits opens up a little bit wider to cast maybe a little bit larger net because I'm pretty focused in on those people who want to get into a franchise for the first time. But Franchise Profits is what I actually changed it already on the server part, so it would show up as Franchise Profits slash Your First Franchise.
Yeah,
So
I think
I'm
that's a
playing with
good
that,
I think that's a good call. It
Yeah.
casts a little bit of a wider net, and then
And it's
obviously,
also good for SEO on the podcast players because it leads with the word franchise.
yeah,
So
and people are always looking, how do I make the most profit?
yeah, so that's what I'm doing there. But it's a fun business. I love what I do. It's serving others, everything we've talked about, and it brings people together. And in all these industries, I love. I mean, I actually love all these industries. There's a lot more industries. I grab these because these really resonate with me.
Talk to your interview process when because you got two different podcasts. Do you do the
Mhm.
same interview? Like so for me, I would
Yeah,
we just talk. But for you, like if you're trying to get specific things out of specific information and things like that, like
yeah.
one, and then how have you grown as an interviewer since you started?
Um, well, the process is I use just a framework. I'm not married to every. I'll send the guest a framework of the questions I will probably ask, and every question leads to another conversation a lot of times. So it just leads to another question naturally. So my framework's only like 6 or 7 steps, and then it's slightly tweaked for the franchise version because I go into the history like, okay, how did this brand come about? There's a founder's story always. But then the listener wants to know, well, what is the investment level? What's the cost to, what does it cost to get into this? What my revenue look like? What support do you provide? I go into that specific area with the franchise piece of the podcast for sure. Yeah,
That makes
for sure.
sense.
And how have I gotten better?
Hmm.
It evolves. I mean, it's a conversation. If it's a conversation like what you and I have, those are the best. And you can tell when somebody's not. Our role is to make somebody comfortable, so they can open up. And sometimes it starts off a little slow, and then you get them warmed up. So I think I've gotten better. If I've gotten better at anything, it's just trying to figure out, okay, how do I find if somebody's a little slow and how do I lighten it up for them so they can enjoy it? I want them to enjoy being on the show. And by the time they're done, they're usually smiling and having a good time.
Have you done conscious things to kind of tweak how you do that? Because I was having a conversation the other day with another the with Peter, the opera singer. He also has a podcast where he brings on people in his kind of musical world, and we were talking. We had like we were just chatting away about like creating the environment for your guests to feel um, a level of openness and vulnerability where it's like they don't feel kind of closed off. So like some of the people that he interviews are like big, very big names in the music industry, and so they kind of are in their, as we said it, like media trained mode.
Mhm.
And so getting them out of that was kind of the focus on ours. But like for you, from the standpoint of was there conscious things that you so like okay I tried to I don't this is like a very surface level basic example but like I tried to open with a joke and the joke didn't land so I'm not going to do that next time but like was there conscious things that you were doing where you're saying like okay this person and obviously again it depends per person. But generally speaking, there's things that you can do. Like we were talking about how some of the bigger podcasts that like go to breakfast before and kind of break the ice there or different things that we don't really have the luxury of being able to do. But there's still little tidbits and tricks that we can use as hosts
Yeah.
to make that process a little bit easier. Are there
Okay.
specific things that you found, or is it kind of just every time you play it by ear? Like how's that worked for you?
I can relate to what the guy, your previous guest
Mm-hmm.
was talking about interviewing the people who are media savvy, they want to be on point.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get people to become real and raw.
Yeah.
And the people who are media savvy are a lot like I prefer to interview a founder of a franchise. Personally, I want to know the person. Okay, so that's important. To be, and a lot of times you I've interviewed a few salespeople that represent the founder. It's never as good as an interview because that salesperson does not have that person's story. They're
Mm-hmm.
repeating their story, you know. So when for the purpose of a podcast, I like to interview the founder because the salesperson wants to be everything to be perfect. They want to be like, okay, I've got this down. These are the things this is why, da, 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 and they go into sales mode, and that destroys a conversation. You're not trying to sell anybody anything. You're just trying to have a conversation. If it piques their
Yeah.
interest, they're going to go find out more about you, which is
Mm-hmm.
good. Um, so that's that piece. Um, that is really important is to get the conversation authentic. And when you ask a founder, you can ask the founder, what's the biggest challenge you've ever had? They're willing to share that because entrepreneurs are used to failing.
Yeah.
They fail a lot.
Always.
And,
Yeah.
and that's, and you as an athlete, you understand why that's important.
Mm-hmm.
You fail a lot. Whereas somebody who's a salesperson working for somebody, they don't want to share their weakness. The weakness is a strength when you're talking about it and how you learn from it and how you can help people with it. That's the biggest thing right there. So I love interviewing entrepreneurs and founders, and I will interview people who work with a company who know how to educate people. They get it, but those people you have to vet to find those people. I had a guy named Eric Murr. He did a great job. He's up in your part of up in your part of the world, Pennsylvania area, and I interviewed him about the 11 deadly sins of investing in a franchise or the mistakes people make when they buy a franchise. And people throw a lot of money away with franchises. They don't, I'm sorry, 11 Deadly Sins and buying a billboard. Let me qualify that really quickly.
Yeah.
11 deadly sins when buying, investing in a billboard for your business. And when you're driving down the interstate, you can tell if you can't read the billboard, there's a problem.
Hmm.
It's really that basic. And the uses for a billboard. So he's somebody who did a phenomenal job on my part, interviewing him. He educated my audience. So I'm looking for people who can, it's entrepreneurs, it's franchisors, and it's people who work with a company who understand how to educate, not sell. That's the
Mm.
key. Because
Yeah.
nobody wants to be sold. And it's funny that I have the name of the podcast is Close the Deal, but we're teaching people how to close the deal on their own business.
Hmm.
Or if it's a franchisor, they're learning how to close the deal on getting the opposite side of it. So, but nobody at the end of the day, nobody wants to be sold.
Yeah. Well, I think that shift, at least in the 2000s anyways, is like everyone is selling everyone is selling something, and the internet has made that very easy to do. Um, and so people are kind of, you've seen the shift even like with the media. People are like, no, I don't. You're like very polished 5 minute segment on whatever channel it is. So it's like, no, I'll rather go watch like two guys having a whiskey talking trash to each other, but like you still get the tidbits in there. Like people, so that authenticity comes through. There's been times where I've like I saw an interview or something with a founder or something like that, and I didn't even need they like what their thing was, but I was like, oh, let me go look at their website and see if there's something that like
Hmm.
isn't too expensive that like I could find some use for, because
Yeah.
it's like you're a small business, like I want to support that, based off the personality of that person. Um, of
I'll,
course,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, of course, then sometimes those people are just very good at selling things, and it comes
Yeah.
off as authentic. But yeah.
And I like it is another question because it's the Close the Deal podcast. There's a question I love to ask.
Mm.
I ask there's two questions there's three questions I generally lead with, whether no matter which podcast it is. The first one is I've traveled enough around the United States. I can usually connect with somebody because there's a good chance I've been to their town or near their town because of the career I've had. And I've been very fortunate in that regard. So that's a connection point, finding that connection point with somebody because they're surprised. You can talk to somebody who's wherever they are, and you know something about their town. Well, one of the questions I love asking though is, what's your favorite place to take somebody to do business to close the deal?
Yeah, I
So
remember we talked
I
about
came
this
from
last time.
I
Yeah,
came from
yeah,
the food world, and food connects people.
it does.
There's nothing better than sitting down with somebody over lunch, dinner, or breakfast to get to know somebody. And so that's one of my favorite questions. And another question I like to ask, the other two questions I like to ask is, what's the biggest? This is a question that I've asked to a salesperson, and this is a question I ask all the time to entrepreneurs. When I asked it to a salesperson, it fell completely flat on its face. All right. And the question is this: what's the biggest challenge you've ever faced in business, and how do you overcome it? The salesperson is like, start talking about his interviewing process, how he got the job. I'm like, no, I want to know what almost broke the back of your business and how do you overcome that? Because
Yeah.
people relate to that. Whereas the sales guy was just trying to, he at the end of the day, he was trying to sell to my listeners. I'm like, it was not a good interview. So, in the third question I love to ask, so I like to connect with people. When they start smiling, I know we're good. So the first one, whether it's the food or the location, and you did that with me today. You did that with New Orleans. I mean, that's the very thing you did, and that opened up, and we're smiling. We're
Hmm.
smiling right away. You're talking about crazy experience in New Orleans,
Yeah, yeah.
finding that connection piece. And the other question I love to ask people about is who or what are you grateful for that got you where you are today? And that opens up people because all of a sudden they're thinking positive thoughts
Yep.
and they're grateful. And whenever you're in gratitude, the stress is gonna release, and you're gonna start smiling. It's just the way it is.
Hmm.
And I've been intentional about that for every single show. I've never missed that question. The other two, I mix it up depending upon the guest I'm bringing on the show.
Yeah, yeah. You want to touch on we were talking before we went live about some of the misconceptions that you found, and we haven't really gotten to that
Oh yeah,
yet. So let's touch on that, and then we can do like where everyone can find you and the book and stuff, and then we'll do a nice succinct wrap
yeah,
up. I feel like this was a good
yeah.
um outline structure of time. It's like we were efficient today.
So the the conversation we just finished on talk about someone not wanting to be sold
Hmm.
is a perfect segue to go back to what we talked about at the before the show started. And what I've learned, so when I ran trade associations, I had a big fancy title for each of the three associations I was part of, leading them. And people below me had fancy titles, and everybody's got titles. And when I became a consultant, uh, I learned something really quick. No one, and if you're in sales or you're a consultant, no one cares about your title. The only thing that that person cares about is whether or not you can solve their problem. If you're going to the doctor, and that is a doctor of optometry, you don't want to see that doctor because that's the wrong title. You don't care about that guy. All you want to do is find the guy who has what the descriptor is that can solve your problem. So in that case, the title does delineate what that person does, but it's that person can get his problem solved. I have done this now for a while, and I've only had one person ask me what my title was. That's it. That is it. No one cares. If you, as an entrepreneur, can solve somebody else's problem, you're doing your job.
Hmm.
That is the bottom line right there.
Yeah. I tell people that even in like corporate settings where it's like, okay, I need to talk to the VP of whatever because they're in charge of blank. And it's like, okay, well, maybe they're in charge of it, but maybe their deputy is actually the one giving like the advice. And if you get in the deputy's ear, then he can convince that person. Or whatever the case may be, is like finding the person that actually can has the like whether it's the authority or the ear of somebody with the authority is equally as important. And sometimes their title doesn't matter, or like often it doesn't matter what their title is at all. Like they could have a relationship somewhere else, like outside of like
Yeah.
they could have been friends outside of the
Mhm.
workplace. And if you get that guy on board with your idea, then he can convince the person that you actually need to make the decision, things like that. Because if it's tough to have access to some of those people or things of that nature, yeah, it's like playing with the relationships that are there, not playing from the negative connotation, but just understanding
Yeah.
the relationships between like you mentioned, you need somebody that can solve your problem, and it might not be the person that you think it is always.
And as you're talking through all this, I'm thinking about something else too. You do something instinctively, and I do, I think, a little bit instinctively and intentional. You go long form on these shows, and I'm very curious. I think you're hyper curious.
Hmm. Yeah, you could say that.
Yes. And that keeps you asking great questions. So you're ask so and what that means is the worst thing in the world is to go in a room. The last thing you want to be is the smartest person in the room. I did not want to be the smartest person. I want to be around people who know a whole lot more than me.
Hmm.
I can learn from those people and build relationships and so forth. And I would almost even say the same thing with the microphone. You don't want to be the smartest person on the microphone, you know?
Hmm.
And so you ask a lot of questions. You're curious because I came in here. So when I'm on the microphone, it's my show. I don't want to be the smartest person on the microphone. I want the other people to come in, the experts to come in and share what they know, and that makes me curious to learn from them. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And
I
that's what
don't
you
like
do. You do
I
that.
don't really like generalizing. Like the smartest person in the room, as far as the statement is like, generally speaking, I would say accurate. But there's things where it's like you know stuff about franchising that I don't know.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean that, and I know stuff about soccer that you don't know.
that's right.
But it's figuring out like everyone knows something that you don't know. And if you go into like if you go through life with that and you figure out what the thing is that that person that you're interacting with knows that you don't,
Hmm.
then it makes it very easy to become curious about that
Hmm.
whatever that subject is. So
Yep.
there's things like it's figuring out what other people in the room are smarter than you on because by
Yep.
the same token
Yeah.
you will also be smarter than people in the room in a
Yeah.
specific area.
Yeah.
But I think generally speaking, it's a good
Yeah.
kind of like blanket to say like you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. It's like yes, of course,
That's true.
generally
And if you
speaking.
go to a franchising conference,
Hmm.
everybody's in franchising. So
Yeah.
everybody knows, and there's a lot of people who've got decades more experience or infinite more knowledge than I
Hmm.
do. But I'm also ahead of a whole lot of other people too.
Hmm.
So it's just where you fall on the spectrum. But how can you serve at the end of the day is what matters.
Yeah.
And and then when you get in a room like that, you want to try to get around people who you want to be intentional trying to find people who know more than you
Yeah.
because you can learn.
Not to be super contrarian, but but sometimes you will end up in the room where it's like you are the expert in
Mm-hmm.
whatever the thing
It
is.
happens. Yeah, yep.
And and that using that as like a learning experience from the standpoint of like I'm gonna learn how to teach this thing better,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm gonna learn how to explain this better, or whatever the case may be is like there's a time and a place for that
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like when I go do soccer trainings, I'm not going into that field with a bunch of like 13-year-olds because I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yes.
That's not why I'm there. But at the same time, you can learn
Mm-hmm.
things from kids and you can
Yeah.
learn things from people always. And that's like goes back to like everyone knows something that you don't know.
Mhm.
Always. Like I was at a training yesterday and this kid is explaining he's like, "Oh, I gotta leave at XYZ time, 'cause I got a Fortnite tournament." But it's not just like, "Oh, I go play video games." It's like the regional qualifiers for esports, something or other, like money's on the line. And
Oh,
he's
wow.
like, "Oh, I've got this regional thing." And I'm like, "What does that even mean?" So I'm asking him questions as we're going through
Yeah.
the drills, like, "What does this mean? Like, how do you qualify for
Right.
this?" All these things. And so it becomes like once you figure out what that person is smarter than you in,
Mm-hmm.
then you're always good.
Yeah.
I I think anyways. That's kind of how I go through things because you'll end up in situations where like with that blanket statement, it's like you are on paper the expert in the room,
Mm-hmm.
technically. But there's
Yes.
something that you are not, always.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
So
Oh, well,
I try to find that thing,
yeah.
always.
That's good. And that's what's fun about podcasting because I mean, I've heard it, others say it, I say it, and it's like a free class for the person who's the host because you
Yeah.
learn constantly from the person who's on the other side of that microphone.
100%. 100%. Tell the people where they can find you, find the book,
Sure.
find the podcasts and all those things.
Okay, so the book, I'd love to gift everybody who's listened this far, especially reward them. You can get a free copy of the book at yourfirstfranchise.com. It's a digital version of it. If you want the physical version of it, you can go to Amazon, but no, all the profits from the book are going to go to Make-A-Wish. So there's a good cause behind purchasing the book. And yeah, so yourfirstfranchise.com. And and then of course that I'll just leave it with that one. That's
Okay.
that's that's what we're talking. We'll focus on that one today. Yourfirstfranchise.com and LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Ewell Smith, Ewell Smith. And that's LinkedIn. If people are in business and they're not on LinkedIn, it's a incredibly powerful place to be, especially
Yeah.
right
I'll put all the links to those in the
now. Yep.
descriptions as always. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Man, Eric, I just appreciate you and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And I want to we'll stay in touch. And if you know anybody in DC who wants a steakhouse, let me know.
Yeah, man, maybe I'll ask around and stuff. Open invite, of course, for you, Mr. Ewell, on the show. Guys, thank you for listening. Check the links out in the description. Go buy the book to donate to a good cause and learn some things. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Thank
Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you want to watch another episode like this one, click there. If you want to subscribe, click there.